Hello, everyone. My name is David Sembeg. I'm head of the division of policy analysis at the APO. And today I invited the author of the Squirkle, Francis Cholle from the United States. He's a thought leader. And you have experienced like toxic culture, or I'm sure that in your life you have worked for like horrible managers or toxic colleagues, or the really some experience, bad experience about the workplaces. Since some of you might have been traumatized, and some have like a nightmares even now. But if you can just escape from where you work, there's no ending. There's no such a thing as like a paradise in the world. So in a way, I believe that we have to contribute improving the organization we work for. So today, that's the reason why I invited Francis Cholle. He took some precious time for us, and we would like to talk about the toxic culture and how we can improve the organization. It's not only about the manager's leadership, it's also about the people. So how we are going to unlock the full potential of the people. At the end of the day, it all comes down to people. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Francis Cholle. And Francis, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hello, David. Very nice to be on your show. I would like to say hello to all your listeners and viewers today. So my name is Francis Cholle. I was born in Paris, France, where I was raised and educated. I started my career in Paris, and then I moved to the United States about 25 years ago, after a year and a half in Germany first. And for the past 25 years, I've been 10 years in New York, and the past 15 years between the West Coast and the East Coast, between Los Angeles and New York City. I am an international consultant, and what I do is I use deep human learning and cognitive science to help leaders and organizations solve complex problems and thrive in disruption. Let me just mention one thing, which I know you know, but maybe not your viewers. I've worked extensively in Asia. I've worked with Japan for many, many years, both with European companies and Japanese companies. I've worked in Korea as well, Hong Kong. I've worked in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. I've collaborated with Taiwanese people as well over different projects. It's always been a great joy, a great pleasure. I like the depth of thinking, I like the thoroughness, and I like the long-term perspective. I like the civility of relationship as well. And it's influenced a lot my thinking and some of the work I've done. The wisdom, the long-term perspective. And I think that Squirkle specifically, by awakening our natural abilities, will speak, and I've seen it actually in the past, will speak to an Asian sensitivity, which usually honors greatly nature. And I think for Asia, it's a way to innovate as you respect your great tradition for nature. So it's this combination of honoring tradition and at the same time being able to be forward-thinking and innovating. So happy to be here and ready to answer any question you might have for your audience.
Okay, thank you. So let's start the concept of toxic culture of any organization. So how would you define a toxic culture?
That's an interesting question. Culture in general is a very complex subject, but toxic culture is when you have islands of people who are more interested in their self-interests than the general interest. And when those groups start influencing the overall culture to the point that there's a lack of trust, a lack of communication, a lack of openness, and that becomes toxic to the point that it affects people's well-being and performance.
To change the toxic culture is never easy, since it is supported by certain people. How can you ever change the toxic culture? What if it cannot be fixed? So is it going to affect the survival of the organization, in your opinion?
Let me step back a little bit and talk about culture more broadly. Culture, is a complex concept. Why? Because culture is in place to make the organization work better. This is what the group has shaped in order to function. So as an external stakeholder, as a consultant, when I come into an organization, I am first and foremost very respectful of what is, because what is, in terms of culture, is what has brought the company to where it's at. So what we do is we don't try to change culture, because to change culture is, first of all, taking the risk of destabilizing something that to a certain degree works well, and maybe could be improved, but well enough for the company to be in place and functioning. And second, because I think rather than pushing against something, it's more interesting to look at how can you enhance it. And when you push against something as a consultant, the chances are that you're going to be rejected by the group, because the function of culture is to ensure the survival of any organization, whether it's a human species or whether it's a corporate group. So touching a culture is like really going into the heart of the safe, where all the secrets and the recipes are held. What I do, though, rather than talking about culture, I look at how people make decisions and how it impacts their ability to deliver on results and strategy. Peter Drucker, the management guru, said one day that culture eats strategy at breakfast. So in other words, culture is very important in any organization in its capacity to deliver on strategy. And if you have the best strategy but a very bad culture, it will be very hard for you to deliver on strategy and to win. On the opposite side, I've seen people with poor strategy but great culture manage to pivot and actually deliver results. So it's important to understand that culture is something to not try to address heads on, and at the same time be very clear that culture is a very powerful force that can compromise results, or on the contrary, enhance results almost regardless of strategy. It's very powerful. So there's another great thinker by the name of Edgar Schein, who wrote a seminal book on culture and leadership. He says, culture impacts strategy. Okay, we know that. And the best way to look at culture surgically and almost objectively is by understanding how people make decisions. And I found about Edgar Schein after I'd come to that same conclusion myself. And that's why the model I developed, Squirkle, is in place to analyze culture through the lens of decision making. So what we look at is what are the strong aspects of how people make decisions that work well for them, and where are the opportunities. And we compare the strength and the opportunities to the strategy and the goals. And we see whether there's a match or where there are places of disconnection.
In many organizations, the management uses fear, intimidation, psychological threats, verbal violence, etc., because they think this actually is faster, and they don't have to argue, and they don't have to consume their energy and time. So although we talk about the flat structure, mostly people tend to believe in the vertical and hierarchical structure to control people.
I understand why people might want to do this and where it's coming from, a certain worldview. I think it's important to keep in mind, as much as these companies are successful with this top-down, command control type of organization and leadership and management style, there is a complete counter movement today that's been actually now in existence for, I would say, almost 20 years. And there's a very good book that I recommend to all my clients, billion-dollar companies. And that book is called Reinventing Organizations. It's by a gentleman by the name of Frédéric Laloux. And he's eloquently put together a book that shows how you can create an organization that actually doesn't need a formal hierarchy to function. And when you do this, you realize that there are natural hierarchies based on merit and individual talents that emerges and function very well. So it's a much more organic way of working. So what we do at the Human Company is we respect what I call the cultural elasticity of any organization that we work for. like a rubber band. You can pull it and stretch it, but if you stretch it too much, it breaks. So you don't want to do this. So again, when it comes to culture, I'm very, very cautious, but I do offer CEOs, leaders, alternative ways to the command control. But rather than teaching it, I give them experiences. We take them through serious games that represent what it is to come together as a group of people to solve complex problems and achieve goals within timelines. And through this experience, people discover that there is a very different way of doing business that actually is the way to address today complexity, uncertainty, and demand for innovative ways and innovation in general. So once they've lived through this experience, I've not taught them anything. They've discovered something new. I then explain it from a scientific standpoint through the model that I invented to look at the way people make decisions, called the intuitive compass for CEOs and the executive teams, and called the Squirkle model to scale throughout the organization and embark everybody in the organization. But what we do it with great respect for existing culture, offering new perspective on how this culture can be stretching so that they can get to their results more safely, more securely, more efficiently, with less effort.
We often talk about transparency and fairness, and 2017 study published in the Journal of Leadership and Organization Studies found that transparent leadership boosts employee creativity. Would you agree to that?
Okay, transparency is a tricky term, like culture, okay? David, I have a question for you. Are you fully transparent to yourself? Are you always transparent to your best friends?
Very good question.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tricky.
It's a difficult concept, but truthfulness, integrity, I believe in, because that's external. Are you stating the true facts? Are you masking the facts? That's pretty much judgeable. And integrity, just like in any mechanical system, there is integrity in the way the different pieces work together to deliver the result expected from the mechanics. So integrity also can be measured and looked at in a way that's objective. So I prefer this. Now, if you want creativity, creativity involves a level of vulnerability because you're going to come up with new things that nobody has tried. And some people may say, oh my God, no, doesn't make any sense. No, we've tried it before so many times. It won't work. No, this is completely out of line with who we are and what we do. You're going to have a lot of pushback. So what's important, I think, is that people feel a sense of belonging, a certain sense of safety. There is research that was conducted by Arye de Geus looking at 25 different companies that were more than 100 years old and had been able to survive the ups and downs of market changes and economic changes. And what he saw as three key factors for success. One is fiscal conservancy, makes sense. The second one is a sense of shared values that brings a community together so that people feel they belong and therefore can take risks and won't be sacked for it, won't be hurt for it. They will be accepted in their capacity to take risks because they belong to the community and the community will support them. And the third thing is the openness to new ideas, whether they come from within the organization or from outside of the organization. And as you can see, fiscal conservancy is clear, not easy, but clear. The sense of belonging, creating a community, will require to nurture people and to make hierarchy as less felt as possible so that people can feel they belong wherever they are in the hierarchy. And that allows young people with new ideas, third dimension, to come up with new things. They're the new blood, and to be listened to in spite of the fact that they don't have much experience and are not high up in the hierarchy. They'll be listened to. And thirdly, being open to ideas from outside. So I would say, to answer your question, a certain level of vulnerability and nurturing is important for organizations to innovate?
So when we talk about the transparent leadership, actually it's about whether the leadership or management are transparent or fair about evaluating people. And when they give a promotion to anybody or pay raise, whenever they make any decision, when it affects everybody in the organization, if they tended to be biased toward some people that they like only, even though some other people actually doing a lot better or in terms of performance, when it comes to the transparency, it's more about, like, for example, if I have like two staff employees, one is just close to me, the other is actually kind of distant. And then I just think that this person who is close to me is not doing well. But simply because I like him, it's because he and I just hit it off well. So no matter what the other staff who is not very close to me doing better or performing well, still I just go for step that I like. Of course, people are not like robots, so we cannot exclude our emotions and our preferences and our own styles. So I wouldn't deny that. And I'm not saying that the leaders or management have to be 100% nonchalant or like detached from their own emotions. I'm not saying that. But still, if somebody's doing a lot better, it's not just should be some your own personal preference. Then I don't see the transparency and I don't see the fairness. In that sense, I don't know whether we can run the organization well or not.
So if you discuss transparency in the sense of fairness, yes, I think that's very important to have clear rules that define the game that everybody's playing. Of course, that humans have biases. Of course, all people have biases, and it's good to be aware of your own biases. Actually, there's been research conducted by McKinsey that show that, the return on investment was superior by 7% in the companies that were really doing self-examination on biases when it came to running businesses. So yes, biases are important. At the same time, as you said it, I don't think you can really erase subjectivity. Organizations are made of humans, people catering to other people, whether they're customers or consumers, and all of this is based on subjectivity. But subjectivity doesn't deny objectivity. So I would say it's important to have both coexisting and be aware of their respective contributions. So subjectivity is linked to inspiration, human connection, emotions, as you said, inspirations, aspirations, intuitions, and you want to preserve this. It's very important because organizations will only be successful if people are fully human. And on the other hand, I agree with you, there needs to be a certain element of objectivity, first of all, to start with, and hopefully to end up on, okay? So there's a journey here. But within the journey, you need to preserve the subjectivity. And I think it's for everyone in an organization to be empowered to get their subjectivity to be heard, understood, and valued, because within that subjectivity lives creativity again, that capacity of agility, and so on and so forth. So as a leader, I think it's important to encourage a certain level of subjectivity within a framework of objectivity.
So can we fix this kind of culture where we don't have, let's say, that the fairness or lack of the transparency or the no learning and just only competition or nonchalance and all these things, let's say that it has been caused by certain people or certain management, then can it fix the toxic culture like this one, like without firing?
Business is about performance. Nobody can deny this because the marketplace is competitive. So I think this is the place to come from. This is where the objectivity can come from. This is where you can really evaluate actions against results. So we start from what are your objectives, measurable goals, and let's look at your strategy to get there, and let's compare your strategy with the way you make decisions. That's how we help leaders and employees together influence their own culture. What I've seen happen is that motivation is a natural human attribute. You don't have to create motivation. Everyone gets up in the morning wanting society to function. Everyone wake up in the morning agreeing that they will stop at the red light and move on at a green light. So there's a natural motivation for people to make sure that things function. And in business, you function if you are competitive and if your company performs. So that's the fundamental rule that we don't need to reestablish. You need to just make sure as a leader that you cater to that competitiveness through a good strategy and well-defined goals. So this being said, then what we do is bring people into a room and we discuss with them what we found out through an assessment about their culture, meaning how they make decisions. So we don't really bring up the word culture, we just discuss how you make decisions, which again is rather tangible to people, rather understandable and interesting, because one decision at a time, you create your own reality and you create your own success. In this process, which is very objective and at the same time subjective, because we take all the non-objective aspects of making a decision, feeling, intuition, everything that makes you competitive today in your ability to deal with uncertainty and with disruption. Truth is in the room, and you don't need to define it. It has its own strength. It's what people want to gravitate towards, what truthfully will help people succeed and the company sustain. In this process of truth, magnetic truth, unearthing this and casting a light by which people understand how they can get to their goal more easily, toxicity is challenged, because toxicity is not serving the greater good of the organization. It's a relative point of view. So that's how I deal with toxicity. I don't oppose toxicity. I create more good air to dissipate toxicity. And the toxicity people then have two options. Either they say, well, should I fight for toxicity? Should I fight against the grain, the movement? Or should I leave? And if they decide to leave, they leave. And then if they decide to stay, they have then two options. Either they keep fighting or they just adopt to go with the vote, to go with the majority. And what I found is that it's much better to give people the option to either leave the boat or stay on the boat, give up toxicity and function with others, because it's everybody's choice. And you don't want to convince people to stay if they don't want to stay, because then you have people who are constantly grudging and constantly opposing and not contributing their best and not role modeling the kind of culture that you want to have. So that's how we deal with it. So not hands-on, indirectly, focusing on the good. So then people, the good becomes so strong that either people decide that they're going to have to leave, they expose themselves from the organization, and if they stay, they realize that they will have to just enter the flow and go with the flow of the majority.
It is really difficult to speak up against the toxic culture where people make a wrong decisions after another. And because usually those who don't want any change to happen to the status quo are the ones who have the power as well. So how can we solve this issue? Because at the end of the day, I believe that a kite rises against, not with the wind. So we have to continue to argue and also to have a very constructive discussion internally.
You work for an organization. You have a deal with the organization. The deal is, first and foremost, you deliver, you get paid. But then, of course, from an individual standpoint, there is a paycheck, but there's also the satisfaction, the experience of working for the organization. That satisfaction is up to each individual. So if you find yourself in a highly toxic environment, but you like so much your job and you like so much your organization that you're willing to invest time and energy to correct the course of the organization, you need to be really, really clear that you're going to fight an uphill battle that's going to be very costly to you in terms of time, career advancement, and potentially health. Soon enough, you will have to really evaluate whether you can win uphill battle or not. Make a choice. Whether the level of toxicity is something that you can tolerate in respect to your love for the organization, the love for your job, and the love for the paycheck, or not. It's a very personal conversation, and it's a very hard situation to keep yourself in my view. We're asking this question from two standpoints. Asking the question from the point of view of the employees, it sounds like. but the big decisions are made by the leaders and the owners and the shareholders. So from the standpoint of the shareholders and the owners, what matters really is the return on investment. And more recently, all the stakeholders, including your employees, the environment, your vendors, and so on and so forth, and many other social dimensions. That's a question for a shareholder to ask themselves. Am I best served by the existing culture, or should I focus on improving culture? And again, my job in that question is not to evaluate whether the culture is toxic or not. My job is to evaluate whether the culture is, through the lens of decision making again, the way people make decisions, is best positioning the organization to succeed at its strategy and its goals. That's my conversation. Rarely do I hear leaders come to me and say, we have a toxic culture. Not the top, rarely. Because they would fix it by themselves, they would address it by themselves. And the way to fix it, if they want my help, is, again, we're here to perform, we're here to fulfill a strategy, we're here to reach goals, and that's really the truthful, the fair value proposition that can bring everybody together, and that can be the parameter by which you evaluate actions and behaviors and attitudes. So that's one thing, and the values. Now, from the standpoint of the employee, I think the employee who enters a company like this, and I've been in that position, and I was even a co-shareholder of the organization, you evaluate how far are you willing. And I can only speak for myself, of my own example. At some point, I decided to leave and take my investment, and sell my shares and move on. And that's what I did, because the culture was too difficult. And when I said too difficult, it was not so much as from an emotional standpoint and personal well-being standpoint, as much as it was from the standpoint that all the effort that we had put in improving the company would have to be redone again because of one leader and main majority shareholder leading the work, the teams, in a way that was more destructive than constructive. And therefore, I felt that what I had learned to make the company better, I didn't have to learn it again. Why would I go again through that same round, waste my time, when I can go somewhere else, grow in my professional skills in an environment that would be conducive of this growth, as opposed to stagnating in a game that I already done and actually achieved, and we had excelled at it. So I think from the standpoint of the employee, it's really a personal matter, because at the time I was the only one who left the company. So it's a matter of courage. We're never a victim of our circumstances. We decide to be victims, but we're never victims. You have always a choice in life.
Maybe I can ask two different situations. One is that leaders actually are not guilty for shaping that kind of culture. Let's say that the culture is already there, like a toxic culture is already there, and then you just arrived in the organization as a leader, and then you want to improve the organization, and you can see that people are not really interested in what they do, and they are not interested in one another. They are not interested in collaboration. They're not interested in improving the organization. They just get paid and they just go home, and that's it, like a clockwork. So in that sense, because that kind of culture has been ingrained so deeply that as a leader, you just arrived in the organization and you want to do something about it. So if you were in that position, and what would you do? Because it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to be that easy, right?
That's what I did when I was 25 and I was called into an old company that was like more than 50-year-old, actually more than 50, 55 or 60-year-old, very respectable art book publishing house in Paris. And I came into a culture that had a lot of pros and a lot of negative to it. At the time I did it as a young man instinctually. Now I can explain it more conceptually. So I'm going to say what I did at the time instinctually as a young man with very little experience. And that's not the kind of thing that you learn at school. You have to learn it through practice when you're confronted to the reality of it. I came back to what's going to make this company, because it was also heavy in debts, very little profitable, in an industry that was highly demanding of capital to be and profitability, therefore, to finance the inventory. The main thing was, okay, let's reestablish profitability to make this organization sustainable. We go back to fiscal conservancy. So that's the first thing I did, focusing on the profitability and competitiveness of this organization. And we did very well. In less than 4 years, we made it the most profitable publishing house in France in all categories. And our category, art book publishing, was the least profitable. So it was a big feat. I only found out later on through industry surveys. I had no idea, okay, when I was doing it. But what I'm trying to say here is that this is the best way to surgically change an organization, make it successful, because everybody wants to be successful, because everybody knows the truth is, the fairness is, an organization that's successful will last. Then you can start discussing, okay, I'm talking, changing the culture, people not knowing where to start. And I was not the main shareholder. I was the managing director called into reforming this organization, revamping it and making it successful. So I said, you know what, the minimum and necessary value proposition that everybody can agree to and commit to is to make this organization successful. And in doing so, I think I created a better culture at the same time. But it was as a side effect that I was not trying to change a culture, I was influencing the culture through my behaviors, my enthusiasm, and my results, so that I would be believable. When I left, some people cried. So they knew what they were leaving behind or what I was leaving behind, and they were not sure that they could go back to this enjoyable culture and successful company. Now, what I tell our clients, the CEOs I work with, is let's look at how decisions are made. Let's take an assessment. Let's create a gap analysis between the desired state and where you are today. And through the way people make decisions, and we analyze it through 17 different parameters. So we really scrutinize it. We can show a path forward that will make the organization more successful. And because decisions, the way you make decisions involves behaviors and attitudes and values, this is the best way to change bit by bit, but through efficiency, through the lens of efficiency. This is the best, safest, quickest way to allow a culture to evolve without working against culture, but kind of influencing culture by the flow of success.
Let's say you just arrived as a leader, and then you found out that mostly people are really dedicated and committed, but then you realize that the way they work, like a management, let's say that the leadership, let's say upper leadership, actually they are the one who have shaped that kind of culture for the past few years. And just people who working for them just adjust themselves to that flow. So let's say that you are the new leader, you just arrived, and you realize that upper management actually are the ones who shape the kind of culture. Yeah. So as a new leader, what would you do to address the issue?
Culture is not something that you fight, it's something that you influence. The best way to influence is to create results. Let's step away from culture when you want to help organizations innovate, whether through products, through ways of working, through products or ways of working. You start small and smart. That's what I always advocate to my clients. We take a low-hanging fruit, we do it differently, and we show results. Then once you have results, you can showcase because you have something interesting to show. And once that's adopted and accepted as being a new way of doing things, or new products to try on the market, or new strategies to market, then you have gained interest from people. And then you can say, okay, well, you thought it was interesting, so let's do it in the other department there. And let's see what we can get. And let's take what worked in that small experiment into this new, bigger experiment. So with culture, same. You look at different practices, maybe you give more autonomy to people, you define new rules of working, but you don't make it in a way that's threatening the entire organization. You do it in a way that's just a sidekick, a side project, something that's almost not under the radar of, let's say, the leaders of the organization, who have entertained certain ways of doing things, certain attitudes, certain ways of language and communication and everything. So you don't threaten this. And you have to prove it to yourself. Because you know what? You come to a culture You come to an organization, if you decide to work for this company, it's because you have some level of inspiration, therefore some level of respect for the organization. So you owe your own respect and inspiration for this organization to try something. And I always tell people, go all the way to the end of your attempt, to change things. And if it really doesn't work, if it cannot be adopted, and you know that you've tried your best, and you know that you've shown results, and those results have not been crowned with acceptance for more inside the organization, then you can leave with a firm conviction that you've tried everything to honor the initial inspiration and the respect you owe to your employer before you step out. And when you have done that, you step out as a free person, free of the past and completely free to embark on a new journey. If you quit cooking a cake that's half-baked, you always have remorse that if you have tried harder, you could have done better. And that will hamper your ability to be successful in your next venture. Try practices and demonstrate that they can deliver results, because results is what organizations are about. Organizations are about performance. So everything needs to demonstrate greater performance. If you can demonstrate greater performance, then people will be interested in what you have to offer. And they will be considering what you have to offer to the point that they may adopt it. If you come with new ideas without the proof that you can perform, it's going to be hard for you to convince people. Much harder. Yes, you can bring benchmark, you can do, comparisons and everything, but is it going to work home? This is always a question you're going to encounter, and you're going to have to show that yes, it can work home, and that's your duty to do this. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to others, you owe it to the organization.
So when it comes to training staff or employees, there's always this fear that is, what if we train them and they leave for better organizations? In fact, it happens quite often. So when I invited Murimoy, the vice president of Solid Korea before, he said, what if we don't train them at all and they all stay here forever?
But it's the same with launching a new product. You can never launch new products, okay? Or you launch new products and your new products may be copied. So you train people because you know that we have to evolve, because the market is evolving. It's not an option, it's a must. Your people and the way we work has to evolve more than ever today. So you train people, and then those who want to leave will leave, and those who feel that they've been treated fairly and they're happy to have grown with you will stay. It's not the end of it all, you can adjust. There are ways to keep people to stay with you. One of them is making sure that you've put in place what's called a reason for being the company that you are, which is even bigger than the purpose. It's really like, we are all contributing to shaping the world. What is our duty? And when you have able to approach a definition of this, people are magnetically attracted to your organization. Why? Because belonging to your organization is not only about proving results, it's before committing to an intention to create a better world. And that's the supreme motivation for people. And then within that lofty goal, you can look at how is it going to translate in terms of business? What kind of business practices do we need to put in place to serve this reason for being and make our mission statement possible as a business? And if you create that kind of ecosystem, people will be extremely, extremely autonomous, because they will be there out of personal choice, and they will dare and take more calculated risks, and they will advance your organization more than they were able if you keep just like a team of lame employees who have no real interest in your future, in their future, to the point that they don't even care whether they're trained or not. I don't think today you can really retain people without training them.
As a leader, you have to manage people, you have to lead people. Sometimes you have to scold them, sometimes you have to admonish them so that they can make more improvements, not because you don't like them, but unlocking the full potential of the employees will boost the productivity of the organization. Amy Edmondson once said that the psychologically safe workplace is very important. and no passion so effectually robs the mind of all its powers of acting and reasoning as fear by Edmund Burke. So what I'm trying to say is, as a leader, you have to encourage people. You have to motivate people so that they can improve themselves and also they can contribute to the organization's advance. But at the same time, there must be some way that you don't discourage them and by intimidating them. But there's a certain point that you also have to be very strict about your employees, because sometimes the leaders rely on the fear, because that way actually is easy to control people. It's not because the leader has any bad intention. But at the same time, because of that, employees just feel discouraged.
Human relationships are complex. So they have different shades and colors. And they will require continuity and commitment and stability, a certain level of stability. That people want to take shortcuts is understandable, but the question is, what is the shortcut really building in the long term? I can see the immediate benefit, that's clear, but are you invoking an adult-to-adult relationship, or are you invoking an adult-to-child relationship, like in transactional analysis? Not transactional, I forgot the name, but I have the word in French, but I don't have it in English, I apologize. So parent to parent, adult to adult, adult to child, child to adult. Okay. So obviously the best relationship is adult to adult. If you instigate fear, you make the other person inferior. I understand the shortcut short term, but I'm not sure what you're building long term. And if you want to have a creative, agile workforce, you need to create a sense of belonging for people to have enough vulnerability to try new things, to follow creative ideas enough so that they can be surfaced, considered, tried potentially, and turned into successful innovations. There's no other way around this. I don't think that there is any top-down organization today that has a rosy future.
Any organization, there are always people who really like controlling people. So they are so obsessed with controlling people. But in a way, actually, it's also because they want to maintain their power that way. Because once they have the control over people and over the system, then they are highly unlikely to lose their jobs. So when people are too much obsessed with controlling their employees, I'm not talking about the leader himself or herself, I'm talking about the management itself. If the people like that actually are in the management and they are one of the decision makers, is there any way that we can deal with such a person?
The first thing is you need to know your convictions. So let's sidetrack for a minute. You know that women's leadership today is considered as something to really look into for success. You know what happened to COVID? 6 countries managed the COVID crisis better than others, and all 6 countries were led by women. There was an article recently on the science of women's leadership. The values that are underpinning women's leadership are typically collaboration, communication, inclusivity, diversity. So I think you need to do some homework as an employee facing that kind of management so that you know what you're talking about and you can bring benchmarks so that you can be really grounded in facing that kind of negativity. And then again, you can't change people. You can inspire people. You can't change culture. You can influence culture. And the way to do it is through bringing results, because this is the nature of organizations, to perform and remain competitive in a competitive environment. So it's an uphill battle again. You need to lay your cards soon enough in a way that's grounded, in a way that's articulated, informed, and then you need to offer a few options to do things differently. And then after a while, you need to really evaluate whether there is a possibility for evolution or none. And if there's no possibility for evolution, then you need to realize, okay, and evaluate what are my expectations in terms of outcomes. Do I want to give more to my career, or is it a time when I can put my career a little bit on hold and just stay in this job because I've got this job and I need to relearn something? It's just going and cruising. And, in 6 months, I will reconsider. All of these things are personal considerations, and there's no like cookie cutter. It's a personal evaluation at that moment.
So even if employees are capable enough, and some organizations simply cannot make good use of their talents, so do you see any way to make it happen? Like, for example, that some organizations, they see the people and their employees, let's say that the employees are really talented and they're very capable, but sometimes the leaders just don't know how to use them well. Is there any best way for leaders to tap into or unlock their potential, like talents, so that the employees can maximize their talents or capabilities?
Of course, there are ways. Okay, again, I think you need to look at a gap analysis. That's the best way. What is the expected outcome, and where am I today, and how positioned I am to deliver on my goals to reach my expected outcomes. And then within this gap analysis, which is what we do, we do it in two ways. We run qualitative interviews, a qualitative survey through one-on-one interviews with people. They can be done remotely, obviously, but we ask in-depth questions to really understand how the organization is perceived, how the use of talent is perceived, the distribution of talent, the different roles, different rules, the different protocols of interactions, the attitudes, the behaviors, and everything. And then we do our quantitative assessment, and we look at, as I said, at the way people make decisions, which is really the heart of the matter in business. We shape our companies through decisions, one decision at a time, and we evaluate how this way of making decisions serves or not the way the company wants to achieve its strategy. And bringing those two things, then we start a conversation. The leader can look really visually, and what you do also is you can segment per population: women, men, young people, older people, departments, countries, regions, functions, and then you look at differences and you analyze and see what's working here, what's less working there, and then you look at individuals. You have the outliers, the people who have the very competence that are needed in this organization to succeed, but obviously because they're not the outlier, because they are the outliers, they're not part of the way of doing business, they probably feel less heard and somewhat disengaged. So you want to go and spend time with them and listen to them and see how they work. And we have a methodology for executive committees to work in a way that really erase hierarchical structures, so everybody can be a co-leader, and then every voice can be contributing their way of looking at things and their way of doing things, and that's very enriching, and then you can really leverage diversity. So what I would say, to answer your question, I don't believe in revolution. I believe in evolution when it comes to organizations. And evolution comes from small steps. But these steps need to be informed, and they need to be mapped. And that's what we provide. We provide a map, a visual map, that's the representation of the gap analysis, so that leaders can try out things and see what works and leave behind what doesn't.
Wow, I think that makes really a great sense, because you just talk about the revolution and evolution. I think it gives just a very good insight on how we can actually tap into the talents in the organization. Because some employees are actually so desperate that they are actually looking for revolution all the time, which actually doesn't come easily. Yeah, so without destabilizing the organization itself, as you said before, actually one of the best ways to bring the positive changes to organization will be evolution, not the revolution.
Go ahead. So, and an evolution that serves, again, the profitability and the top line of the organization. This is the rule. This is the fundamental. This is the keystone.
Oh, yeah.
But you can get to results in a different way. Okay, so what you do is you get to results in different ways. You try new ways, you showcase new ways, and hopefully you get more results. And that's how you validate the new ways.
Let's talk about your book a little bit, because when I heard your book title, like a Squirkle, then I think to myself, what? Squirkle? What is a Squirkle? No, then it turns out that actually it's a square mind and then also circle mind, with square qualities and circle qualities. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. So what I've observed in organizations, that I work for, they're all looking for new solutions, innovation, change, and everything. And at the same time, again, the way they make decisions is very square, meaning very controlling. They want to make sure that they have in place the right strategy to reach their goals. Fine, I understand that. But that way of thinking and going about things is not so well fitted for very complex environments and uncertain environments, which is exactly what we're facing today. So the old way of doing things, which is command control, I got my strategy, I've set up my goals, and I'm going to go hands-on to it and push through to make it happen, is less and less operational, less and less valid. So I thought, okay, we need to really offer a different way of doing things. So that's why I brought the notion of intuition, which allows you to go beneath or beyond where the logical mind can go. The logical mind understands what's right, what's wrong, what's shorter, what's taller, what's heavier, what's lighter. So it's binary. Gray doesn't understand. Black, white understands. But as we know in life, every day, everything is in a gray zone. Very rarely can you say, oh, I want this or I don't want this. The notion of toxicity is a gradient, true of so many things today. We need to go deeper. We need to mobilize a deeper intelligence than simply the logical mind. The beauty of it is that this deeper intelligence doesn't negate the logical mind. You can be perfectly logical and at the same time be open to more. But if you stay logical in a dominant way, in a square way, then you lose your ability to be open to more. Let me give you an example. Very simple story. So this is the story of the parrot. The parrot has a nest, and the parrot is free to fly. The freedom to fly is symbolized by the circle. Agility, creativity, self-sustainability. Okay, that's the parrot in nature. The nest is the structure. The parrot comes back to its nest. It's a place that it's used to, safe enough to repose, and so on and so forth. Now, a human being would say, oh my God, this parrot in the wilderness, only a simple nest, it's exposed to many things. Why don't I put the parrot in a house that's closed so that nobody can get to the parrot? And at the same time, the parrot will always be next to me. I won't have to wait for the parrot, so it will always be there. So now you move the nest, the structure, the square, into a dominant square, a house where the parrot is locked in. It becomes a prison. And what happens? You feed the parrot is always there, the parrot is protected, but the parrot loses its creativity, its agility. The circle is no longer free. The circle is no longer a circle. The bird is no longer a wild bird, it's an object of decoration. So when you use strategy to control things, it becomes a cage, and it diminishes your natural ability to be creative and adaptive and to be sustainable. So Squirkle is the interplay between square and circle that creates synergies and not imprisonment. Synergies between the square and the circle so that they can give their best and create more than they would individually, versus the way we tend to do things, which is command control, domineering, wanting to secure absolutely results, when it's much better to be open because disruption will come your way, and being open will keep your creativity and agility so that you can deal with disruption. We're naturally born to deal with disruption, but the structures we've put in place have limited the circle in us.
We talked about the task culture, and we talked about the leadership, and it just talked about also Squirkle. It actually all comes down to how we are going to unlock the full potential of the employees. That's why we have been talking about all these things. So why we talk about the importance of leadership is because it also directly can contribute to improving or unlocking the full potential of the employees. So I would like to talk a little bit about the Mount Everest 1996, since it simply teaches us a lot about the importance of leadership. So overconfidence or sunk cost effect and recency fallacy. So in 1996, around 8 people died in Mount Everest because they were following simply their leader. So what can we learn from this incident, metaphorically speaking?
Yeah, every human being have the ability to make autonomous choices. Leadership is a human expression. it's not set in stone. It's evolving and it can fail. Employees should express enough leadership so they can evaluate the leadership they're following. When I get on a boat, whether a motorboat or a sailboat for a cruise, I instinctively evaluate the captain. Because in a way or another, I'm giving my life to that person. And I have an immediate evaluation, which may be wrong, may be right. But that evaluation, I will keep it in mind and I will keep it alive. And I will observe the captain and how he or she is steering the boat. And I will evaluate whether there's hubris or whether there is a contained sense of confidence. So metaphorically, I'm the employee on the boat. You know, I've subcontracted to that leader my well-being, but I don't forfeit my leadership. And my leadership is expressed in my continuous evaluation of that leader. I was once in the Sahara, and the guide took us on an expedition without water, without matches, and a woman was overweight and didn't work fast enough. And on our way back from where we went to look at wall paintings from millennia ago, on our way back, we hit dusk and then nighttime. We had no light and we had no water and we had no warm clothing. And there was no way for us to find our fire camp. The leader was not even asking people to walk one after the other in line with somebody at the top, somebody at the end, appointing one strong person at the beginning, appointing somebody strong at the end, so that everybody would move cohesively. And I was really upset. And I just happened to see lights far away, far out, because all my antennas were out at that moment. All my instincts were out, my survival instinct, and I saw lights. And the lights were the jeeps of the Tuareg looking for us in the Sahara. And I told Philip, the guide said, look, there are lights there, look, look, look. And then they found us. They were so upset at the guide. And from that moment on, I spent all my time, all the rest of my trip in the Sahara with the Tuareg and no longer with the guide. He had lost my trust. And quickly enough, I analyzed that he had got us lost, which was really a very negative, and he was not handling our situation well. So at that point on, he was no longer my boss. I was my own boss. And that's how I spotted the jeeps in the darkness. So the morality here, which I think applies to what happened in the Himalayas, is that you give your trust to people, but that's not a blank check. You're still linked to one another and you have autonomy in that relationship. And you have responsibility. And what I tell all my clients, leaders need leaders. You want to have leaders around you. You want to have people who are challenging you. You want to have people who think even deeper than you or differently than you and bring back information, benchmarks, ideas that you would not have alone. That's how you have a thriving organization. And that's the culture of leadership that you need to instillate in your organization. It's like 360 leadership, leadership on every chair. I don't care what your position is in the organization. You come to my organization, you need to be a leader, and I love when you challenge me. Even if we agreed on something else, but you come back with something better, be my guest. And I tell all my employees.
Let's talk about the importance of shaping the learning culture of the organization. Erwin Toffler once said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So in organizations, they don't encourage their employees to learn somehow. They just believe that you just stick to what you know, and they don't actually encourage the learning itself.
When I start with any organization, we start with this serious game. And the serious game is about resolving a complex problems with a metric. You can measure the result, the outcome. It's completely objective. You fail or you pass. And the game is described at length in Squirkle, so I don't need to revisit it, but it's really a complex situation where you need to engage rationally with the situation, but you cannot let your rational mind control the experience. You have to be open to how you feel your way through it, how you receive information, Are you into it? You know, you need to be heuristic, really be fully human, fully engaged, fully present, as much as, you know, from a sensorial perspective, from an extrasensorial perspective, from a physical perspective, instinctual, intuitive, and at the same time, intellectual and rational. And the beauty of this exercise that it shows people that your way, your capacity to solve complex problems doesn't depend on your competence or your level of skills from an objective standpoint. It really relies only in your ability to not know, be vulnerable, let go of the outcome, be fully present, and access a deeper intelligence. Because as humans, we can naturally solve complex problems. We're complex, nature is complex, we are of nature, we are wired for complexity, we are wired for complex problem solving, we are wired for adaptation, we are wired for disruption. So in this world where more and more it's about unlearning rather than learning more, the beauty of it is the more you accept to unlearn what you've known, the more open you are to this innate ability to move you through the complex situation that you find yourself. Because that ability to solve complex problems is of our nature. It's not something that you need to acquire. It's something you need to awaken. It's already inside of you. So, but I established this through experience. It's not a theory. It's not a theory. I don't teach anything. I let people have this experience. And then I let people debrief the experience together. And I let them come with incredible insights. And then I explain the science behind it. Because everything we do at the Human Company and the Squirkle Academy is based in science and modelized. So the unlearning thing becomes a second nature for the companies, the employees that we work with.
One question is about the people that, let's say that if you compete, of course, this competition is always there, which is understandable. But on the other hand, there are actually two ways to handle the competition, in my opinion, between colleagues. That you compete also. For example, that if somebody is doing well, then you can also try your best to also get better. That's one way. The other way is actually you just drag them down to the mud, and you just start like talking badly about them and trying your best to discount the value. So if you are a leader and you have to handle that kind of situation, for example, that there are two groups. One group all the time trying to improve themselves by learning, and they also try to hone in on their new skills. On the other hand, the other group is like all the time they talk badly about the other group, and they're not trying to learn anything, but they're just saying that what they do is actually means nothing. They just talk. So as a leader, how would you address that kind of situation? Because as you know, at the end of the day, it's so easy to just talk, and walking the talk is different matter. So how can I motivate the other group who don't want to learn, but they just want to do all the politics and discounting the value of the other people?
You know, again, what politics serve, and how does politics bring results? You know, I always say the truth is in the room. What has integrity lives in the room, and people can feel it. They may not be able to express it. They may not be able to articulate it. They may not be able to say what is the strategy supporting integrity, but it is there. So it's a complex issue to turn this feeling into a reality. Okay? So rather than seeking control of a complexity which will not work, that's what human race has done with nature. Nature is complex. We wanted to control it. Doesn't work. COVID has told us this, for those who were not convinced. Okay? So control is not the way to succeed in a complex environment. It's not about controlling the group of talk. It's about feeding the truth, feeding the integrity that will get the organization to succeed. Then the people who talk, what kind of credibility are they going to have in the end? The one who in working towards making the truth a reality and turning into results will have the credibility. And then those people will have two choices, as always. Either they leave, or if they stay, they won't be able to resist very long, and they will have to adopt the mainstream culture that supports results. You know, I mean, if an organization is asking me to help them with this is how I do it, and I can assure you it works, It's always worked, and it works over again. I even worked in a non-profit company, organization in the United States, in Los Angeles, California, where they had a disagreement that was ideological at the board level. And they couldn't talk to each other for 6 months. And I was brought in through somebody who used to work for a company I had been consulting for, so she knew our reputation, and she brought me in, and I came pro bono. So there was not even, I was not doing this for anything, just to help. And in a day and a half, in 1 day and a half, we turned this group of highly intellectual, sophisticated, competent board members who were all disagreeing to the point that they were not able to communicate or yelling at each other into a highly functioning team that had actually agreed on a path forward.
We can talk about like a trust, importance of trust, and importance of empathy,
Yep.
importance of consistency,
Yes.
and also importance of predictability.
Yes.
Because so all these things that can contribute to unlocking the full potential of the people.
Empathy is a natural thing, proved by a neuroscientist, David Richardson, or Richard Davidson, I think it's Richard Davidson, at Wisdom 2.0 3 or 4 years ago, was sharing on stage his research that if you bring a newborn, 6 months old, and present to the newborn 2 adults, one displaying empathy and the other one not displaying empathy, where do you think the newborn gravitates towards?
Yeah, definitely adult who shows the empathy, definitely.
Okay, so that means that empathy is natural to us. Because a 6 months old has no understanding of this. It's not a cultural choice, it's a natural choice. So empathy is a natural thing. The second thing that you were talking about is consistency. Do you know, in your honest estimation, do you know people who never brush their teeth or never drink water? But what I'm trying to say, people who would not drink water eventually would have to go to the hospital. They would be dehydrated. Consistency is a natural thing as well. It's a natural. It's being part of an ecosystem like nature. Requires consistency. You take care of yourself. So now you have empathy, a natural thing. You have consistency, a natural thing. You have motivation. We are all motivated for the world to work together. I can tell you, I'm in Los Angeles, there are huge fires, the skies are really horrible. In San Francisco, there was no daylight at noon all the rest of the day. It felt like apocalyptic. We all have a desire for this to be fixed, regardless of your system of creed. So we are all motivated for things to work. So you have motivation, consistency, and empathy that are natural to us. And then we cannot live alone. We all collaborate. At some level, you collaborate. And if it's just like driving, you collaborate. You stop at the red light, you go at the green light. We all collaborate with one another. That's a natural, we are interdependent, we know that. You have collaboration, motivation, empathy, consistency. What else you need? The one thing that you need is to allow people to be humans. You need to allow people to just be rather than do. And do comes out of a result of all these qualities that are inherent to us. So there's a fundamental trust that you need to have as a leader, to come back to trust. But trust is not something that you can buy or that you can just give. It's something that you need to build through experience of consistency, of empathy, of motivation, and of collaboration. So honestly, the end game, all the ingredients are there to create a great cake, but you'll need patience. You'll need to accept that things will never go the way you thought they would go. And that you'll be at the end, you'll have a better surprise than you would have thought if you let things be. And those type of organizations are the organization of the future. Why? Because the world is becoming more and more uncertain, less and less predictable, more and more complex. Therefore, the command control, the hierarchical organization, the top-down, controlling, intimidating culture will not be your best bet for the future. I understand what it served, but I don't think it's your best investment into the future. That's not the best way to get to where you want to be, meaning having a flourishing, successful organization. And that's what Squirkle helps people to understand in a very simple way, very accessible way, in a natural way. There's nothing that's being taught. It's only about unlearning certain old patterns to rediscover what we naturally have in us that can serve the organization of the future. There's a performance booster in every organization today. And as we said, performance is the grail. That's what we all want in organization. In different ways, but that's the end of the game. The end game is performance. Those performance booster are women. Absolutely. They have the skill set of the future. They understand collaboration. They understand empathy. They understand communication. They understand reliability in a different way than men. Can men learn it? For sure. Are women closer to it today than men are overall? Yes. Studies prove it. Are some men as close to that as women are? For sure. But collectively, as a majority, as a looking at the whole, women are closer. Women have lessons to taught. Women have lessons that men can learn from women. And that's part of what organizations need to acknowledge. They need to acknowledge that they have a whole population that could serve them so much better if only we were paying attention to them, listening to them, and trusting that they have something that we don't have as male. And unfortunately, organizations were created by men for men historically, but women, therefore women are not heard, women are not so welcome, women are not so welcome to contribute what they have, don't always feel they fit, and that's a huge loss. And that's something that every organization can correct, and every organization can benefit from, and thrive better from in this disruptive world. And I think that's one key message I would like to pass on today to Asian leaders who understand very well, intuition and collaboration and interdependence. And some of them do amazing work in promoting the leadership of women. And I think there's an opportunity there everywhere in the world, by the way.
Francis, I have just one last question. Are you working on any other book now? Because your insight is so great, really.
I just completed the books. I'm working on marketing the book. No, what I'm developing now is a coaching certification, so that I can go to organization and impart on a number of executives this way of doing things, so that they can then teach it to others and use this methodology for collaboration, for communication, for adaptation, and for innovation. So if people go to squirkleacademy.com, they will see all this information. And we are shaping I've been beta testing a coaching certification. And for now, the reception has been great. So the next book will be a handbook for the certification in Squirkle coaching. And people can go at the top right of the screen of the homepage, test your thinking. If they click on test your thinking, then they will have direct access to a short questionnaire. It will only take them 3 minutes, and that will give them an insight on their way of thinking, as well as insights about their team members. There are 7 different profiles. All these profiles are detailed, given their strength, their areas of opportunities, tips to cultivate their strengths, and tips to cultivate their opportunities so they can all grow together. And that will help them communicate better, collaborate better, adapt better, and innovate better individually and with other profiles. So it's a powerful tool, very simple assessment, very short period of time, 3 minutes, and access free, just for your readers and your viewers and listeners.
So really appreciate that you share this great insight on the organization and how we can unlock the full potential of the people. And your insight on the leadership, and deeply impressed by when you talk about the evolution and revolution, because many people just want the drastic changes overnight, which actually rarely happens. So your insight is much appreciated, and I'm sure that the viewers have learned a lot from you today.
Thank you, David. Bye to you. Stay safe. May all your viewers stay safe. And thank you for listening to this session today. Very much appreciated.
The viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because otherwise we are going to miss out on a lot. So we are going to invite also more experts, and so that we can hear their insights. And today was fantastic. Francis, my special thanks to you. So I hope they stay well and stay safe in the middle of the COVID-19.